Welcome back to the Perfectly Homeless podcast.
We've spent 50 episodes scoring U.S. states on this exact system. Now we're taking the same scorecard global.
Because homelessness looks radically different depending on which country you're in.
Right.
So today we are building a scorecard for the Philippines. And just as a heads up, the score is going to evolve dynamically during this analysis.
Yeah,
we won't reveal it all at once.
Exactly. We're going to build it step by step. So to start off, we need to look at the country overview. And the first thing you have to understand is the sheer scale of the crisis here.
Which is staggering.
It really is. The data shows an estimated 4.5 million homeless individuals nationwide. But the critical part is where they are.
Right.
Roughly 3 million of those people are concentrated just within the dense urban sprawl of Metro Manila.
Just in Manila alone. I mean, that makes it one of the highest urban homeless populations in the entire world.
Easily.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of extreme density, it really shapes everything about how people survive there.
It has to.
But before we jump into the actual scorecard categories, we really need to look at who is affected. The demographics show a very specific and pretty heartbreaking story.
Yeah, the youth numbers.
Right. Nearly 37.9% of this population is under 18 years old.
Wow, so almost 40% are kids.
Basically, which leads to this incredibly high youth vulnerability.
But it's not just youth, right? The drivers of this they're super complex. You have this huge convergence of different vulnerable groups.
Right. You have climate migrants, for one.
Okay.
People who've been completely displaced by these massive typhoons that just regularly batter the islands.
Right. And then you also have the rural poor who migrate to the capital because they're desperately seeking medical care that just doesn't exist in their home provinces.
Exactly. And on top of that, women escaping domestic violence who literally have nowhere else to turn.
Yeah. It's a huge convergence. And I think it's important to point out how this reality differs from the U.S. baseline that our listeners already know.
Right. Because in the U.S., we think of
sprawling tent encampments in empty lots, right? Or tarps in public parks.
Yeah.
But the Philippine experience is fundamentally different. It's deeply integrated directly into the concrete urban infrastructure itself.
Right. Families are living inside these wooden push carts, known locally as caretins, and they're just parked right on busy, bustling sidewalks.
Or they live in these makeshift shelters that are literally suspended underneath highly engineered highway bridges.
Yeah, it's built right into the city.
Yeah.
And the structural backdrop to all of this is this massive national housing deficit. The government is short about 6.5 million units.
Which is, I was trying to conceptualize that earlier. It's like trying to seat an entire stadium full of people with only a handful of folding chairs.
That's a good way to put it.
The math just guarantees that millions are left standing.
Right.
No matter how hard they work.
Which brings us perfectly to the first category on our scorecard, which is housing affordability. To understand the lived reality here, we have to look at the economics. So currently, about 16.7% of the population lives below the poverty line.
Right.
And in Manila, if you want to rent a room, just the most basic room, like a tiny, unventilated space in a slum, it costs an absolute minimum of 1,000 pesos a month.
Okay, so 1,000 pesos. What does the income side of that equation look like? How does someone living in a pushcart make that?
Well, that's where the whole system just completely breaks down. It becomes a mathematical impossibility. Let's take a scavenger working on foot.
Okay.
Someone just using plastic sacks to collect recyclables to sell to junk shops.
Right.
On a good day, they might earn about 30 pesos.
30, wow.
Yeah. And even if they have a caraton, which allows them to carry a lot more weight, cover more ground,
Sure.
they might max out at like 150 pesos a day.
I just have to pause on that because the viability of that system just completely collapses when you look at those numbers.
It does.
How does anyone break out of that trap? Because if your daily survival costs just to get rice and clean water exceed your daily income of 30 or even 150 pesos, how do you save up 1,000 pesos for a roof?
You don't. You simply can't. And that trap is so clearly illustrated by the lived experience of people on the ground. There was this sociological report that highlighted a woman named Dominga Abinoja.
Oh, right. I read that.
Yeah, she migrated to Manila at age 30, and her only goal was just to get free cancer treatment for her husband at a government hospital.
Just trying to access basic health care.
Right, but the bureaucracy took so long, and the treatment never materialized in time, so her husband passed away.
Oh, man.
And she ended up trapped in the city for decades, literally scavenging barefoot on the hot pavement just to survive.
Because the gap between what she earned and what rent cost was just...
It was a chasm she could never cross.
That is just heartbreaking. It shows that hard work does not overcome a mathematically rigged system.
No, it doesn't.
So this lowers the overall picture significantly for affordability.
It does. And if they can't afford rent and they're stuck on the streets, that shifts us to the second category, which is shelter access.
Right.
Because we have to evaluate the conditions when permanent housing is out of reach.
Yeah.
And in Manila, there is a massive shortfall in formal shelter beds.
Yeah, like those women fleeing abuse we talked about earlier.
Exactly. They face extremely long wait lists just to get into a safe space.
Yeah.
So because formal shelter isn't there, daily survival completely relies on those makeshift shelters.
And those makeshift shelters carry huge chronic health risks.
Right.
I mean, constant exposure to the tropical heat, the vehicle exhaust pollution.
Well, it's not just the slow-moving risks, right?
No, it's acute physical danger.
Right.
Because the environment itself is a threat multiplier.
Yeah.
Living under a bridge during monsoon season, the water rises incredibly fast.
Yeah, and those shelters are just made of scrap wood tied to concrete pylons.
Exactly. There was a report detailing a shelter under a bridge in Quezon City that just completely collapsed during a sudden downpour. Yeah, it killed a father of 3. And the worst part is his widow and kids had to keep living in that exact same spot afterwards.
Here.
No, because there were 0 alternative shelter options for them.
That is devastating.
Yeah.
So who is stepping in if the state system is that overwhelmed? Who's filling the gap?
It's mostly civil society and nonprofits. They're heavily carrying the load here.
Okay.
Like the Anak Tank Foundation, they specifically target street children, trying to pull them out of exploitation.
Right.
And then there's the AJ Kalinga Foundation, which is incredible. They've optimized things so well that for just 85 pesos, they can give a street dweller a hot meal and a clean shower.
That level of efficiency is amazing.
Okay.
But based on this, the current draft score is still severely impacted because the system is just way too dependent on private charity to keep people alive.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the third category, criminalization and enforcement.
Right. This is a tricky one.
It is. This looks at how the state physically manages homelessness in public spaces. In the Philippines, it's defined by Presidential Decree 1563.
The anti-mendicancy law.
Right. And on a daily basis, this is enforced by the Metropolitan Manila Development Authority, or the MMDA.
Right, the road clearing operations.
Yes. They officially classify pushcarts and pedicabs as, quote, street obstructions.
Now, to keep this objective, we need to look at both sides of this. What's the argument for doing this? Because I imagine officials say it's about keeping the highways safe and clear, right?
Yeah, that's exactly the state's rationale. Supporters argue these sweeps are necessary for urban beautification, for sanitation and public safety.
Especially on highways like EDSA, which has some of the worst traffic on Earth.
Right. Keeping those sidewalks and highways clear is economically essential for the city to function. And they also argue that enforcing these laws discourages street begging and protects children from being used by syndicates.
Okay, but critics contend the reality on the ground is way darker because they argue these sweeps effectively criminalize survival itself.
How so?
Well, when the MMDA seizes a Caraton, they aren't giving out a parking ticket. They literally throw the pushcart into a garbage truck. They are simultaneously destroying a family's physical shelter and their only asset to make a living.
That's brutal.
Yeah.
And critics also point out the forced relocations, right?
Yeah.
Like the indigenous Bajau sea dwellers.
Right. They come to Manila to beg, and authorities literally round them up and fly them back to Mindanao.
Which critics say is a disaster because it's spatial and cultural displacement. You're dumping vulnerable people in unfamiliar rural areas with no resources.
So they just find their way back to Manila eventually.
Exactly.
It's like taking a carpenter's tools, throwing them away, and then penalizing him for not building a house. You took the one asset they needed.
Right.
So this shifts the score in a very heavy, punitive direction.
Let's actually pause here to show where we're at. We are putting the preliminary score overlay on the screen now.
Right. And let's clearly label this as the draft score. I want to emphasize that this is not the final score.
No, definitely not.
The remaining categories might significantly change the final result.
So let's look at the fourth category, vehicle dwelling friendliness. Because when a garrison gets destroyed, people often shift to transit sector homelessness.
Right, living in vehicles, like the Bajau families who live entirely inside modified pedicabs.
Exactly. Or post-pandemic, thousands of traditional Jeepney drivers lost their income.
Because of the lockdowns.
Right, and they got evicted.
Yeah.
So they adapted the very vehicles they drive for a living into homes. They call them Dutch houses.
And it's fascinating mechanically. They put cardboard over the windows for privacy. They set up little cooking stoves inside.
Right.
And they just sleep on those long passenger benches.
It's incredible resourcefulness.
Yeah.
But this whole ecosystem is facing a massive systemic shock right now. The government rolled out the Public Utility Vehicle Modernization Program, or PUVMP.
Right, to phase out the old smoke-belching Jeepneys.
Yeah, they want to replace them with modern, eco-friendly minibuses, which sounds great for the environment.
Right, until you look at the economics.
Exactly.
Because those new minibuses cost, what, like 1.2 million pesos each?
Around there.
Yeah, so for a driver who's literally living inside their Jeepney because they are in profound poverty, getting 1.2 million pesos is impossible.
It's a non-starter. So this mandate threatens to eliminate their livelihood and their shelter in one single stroke.
Exactly, pushing them straight into completely unprotected street destitution.
This lowers the overall picture for vehicle dwelling heavily.
It does. But this is where the narrative actually shifts a bit. Which brings us to the fifth category, outreach and social services.
Okay.
The government is trying to build a new safety net here. The Department of Social Welfare and Development, the DSWD, they introduced the PAGABOT program.
Right. Institutionalized by Executive Order 52.
Exactly. And they deploy these specialized social worker teams 204/7 across Metro Manila.
Which is huge, because instead of waiting for people to come to an office, they're physically going out to find people on the streets.
Right, offering medical care, mental health support, and crucially, legal help to get identity documents.
Because if you don't have a birth certificate, you can't access any formal state services. Right. And they're adapting the financial aid, too, with the modified conditional cash transfer for homeless street families, the MCCT-HSF.
Yeah, that stood out to me because traditional aid programs always require a permanent fixed address, right?
Always, which immediately excludes the homeless.
Exactly. But this program bypasses that rule entirely, so street families can get education grants and health subsidies without a fixed residence.
But how do they actually do that? Like, how do you track and distribute cash to a family that's constantly moving around to avoid those MMDA street sweeps we just talked about?
It's a massive logistical challenge, but they solve it by partnering heavily with community-based NGOs, people who already have established trust on the streets. They use localized street facilitators, mobile technology, community mapping to actually locate these families.
So they don't rely on mail or fixed addresses at all.
No. The conceptual shift is what's amazing. They designed a social protection program that doesn't disqualify you for simply being unhoused.
That's a huge evolution in state policy. This raises the overall picture for sure. Which brings us to our sixth and final category, pathways to permanent housing.
Right. Does any of this actually lead to a permanent roof?
Well, our sources show a pretty stark contrast between state programs and community NGO models. Let's look at the state first. They heavily rely on the Balik Provincia program.
Which means back to the province.
Right. It's a rural relocation program, but urban planners say it suffers from a severe spatial mismatch.
The mechanics of that are just devastating. The government builds houses in rural provinces to decongest Manila.
But there are no jobs there.
Exactly. No jobs, no commercial centers. So a family gets a roof, but faces immediate starvation.
Because they can't earn an income. So they're forced to migrate right back to the streets of Manila.
And even with that MCCT HSF program, the rental subsidies are strictly capped at 12 months.
Which isn't enough time.
Right. They expire long before a family can secure formal employment.
But the bottom-up solutions from civil society take a totally different approach. You have groups like Habitat for Humanity using disaster-resilient bamboo frame homes.
Specifically designed to withstand typhoons.
Yes. And the Homeless People's Federation Philippines, the HPFPI, their model is amazing. They help slum dwellers pool their own meager savings to buy land collectively.
Right, and then they build the homes themselves using sweat equity.
Exactly. They focus on securing land tenure within or near the city, avoiding that whole spatial mismatch problem.
They empower the residents to literally be the architects of their own stability.
Based on this, the current draft score is ready to be finalized. We've seen a massive divergence between innovative policies and the grueling street-level reality.
So let's bring it all together. To summarize the strengths, we've got highly innovative adaptive outreach through the PAGABOT program.
Right.
And resilient community-led NGO networks that stretch every single peso.
But the weaknesses are structurally severe. Aggressive punitive asset seizures, severe spatial mismatch and relocation, and that massive 6.5 million unit housing deficit.
So let's assign the letter grades. Housing affordability grade, F, shelter access grade. D, criminalization and enforcement grade. F, vehicle dwelling friendliness grade. D, outreach and social services grade. B, and pathways to permanent housing grade. C.
Taking all of that into account, we can reveal the final perfectly homeless country score. For the Philippines, the final score is a D+ tab.
And the justification for that.
Despite highly innovative social outreach programs, the sheer scale of the housing deficit and the aggressive criminalization of street-level survival assets keep a permanent roof mathematically out of reach for millions.
In Manila, survival is a masterclass in resilience, but you can't build a permanent foundation on a moving pushcart.
Which leaves you with a lingering question. If community models where people pool resources to buy land are more sustainable, what would happen if the government stopped trying to build housing and just focused on giving secure land rights directly to the people?
That's the perfectly homeless country score for the Philippines.
If you would like to help support this channel, please hit like and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one.